Okay, so we will go to our next speaker, which is Markéta Rejková from Ostrava Zoo, and she's going to give us a presentation on her work she does on freshwater ecosystems in Sulawesi in Indonesia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I'm going to start with a question, and I'm going to give you $1 million question. And I mean the question seriously. Can you catch a specific fish from a lake which is 590 meters deep? Think about it, and if you have any ideas, please, after my presentation or after the event, come to me and share with me your ideas, because I don't have the $1 million here with me in my pocket, but the Indianapolis Zoo actually is offering it in their Saving Species Challenge, and they will give $1 million to whoever comes with a plan how to improve the existing status of a threatened species. Okay. So I'm going to share with you the story, which I believe is one of the saddest stories of the conservation world today. That's the lake. I have been mentioning 590 meters deep. But the story, unfortunately, is taking place underwater. So it's like being invisible. And we are about to lose dozens, literally dozens of species which are very unique if a miracle doesn't happen. So I'm going to share the story with you, and I will be happy to hear your suggestions. 15 years ago, every aquarist in Europe started to talk about Sulawesi, because some new species were imported from Sulawesi, and the aquarists just met this unprecedented beauty. All the species were very attractive, very tempting to get them, and very different from what we know. And Sulawesi has quickly become a phenomenon, and it is still today. And although not every aquarist actually knows where Sulawesi is, they know that it's something unique. Without aquarists, we won't be talking about this topic today. So where is Sulawesi located, and why is it so special? Both these questions have the same answer. It's an Indonesian island located west of Borneo, and it's located in a zone, biogeographical zone, which is called Wallacea. It's where, hypothetically, the fauna of Australia and Asia meet, but in fact they do not meet. The zone has been separated for a very long time, and it doesn't mean that the species from Asia and Australia mix there. Actually, there's many endemic species living in the zone. So Wallacea, and especially Sulawesi, has been nicknamed a laboratory of evolution with dozens of endemic species, and this is doubly true for the freshwater lakes. There are several ancient lakes, means at least 1 million years old, and you can imagine the number of endemic species. These have not escaped the attention of the scientists, so where else but on Sulawesi you can have a freshwater snail on the cover of a scientific book. There it is, right in the center. Still a Melania genus, and you see that some of the lakes, quite a lot of species live, and they are really interesting not only for the scientists, because it's not only the scientific book, but also the aquarium journals in Europe and other parts of the world featuring these snails. You can see they are really colorful. They are actually big, can grow up to 12 centimeters, the biggest species, so they are really attractive creatures. But Sulawesi, it's not about snails. It's mostly about shrimps. When aquarists talk about Sulawesi, they talk about shrimps. You see, it's no wonder, because they are really, really attractive. Have to admit that the shrimps look better on the photos than in reality, because they are very small, sometimes less than 2 centimeters. So enjoy the photos, because in aquariums you only see some red dots or blue dots. They have different colors. But no wonder that people want to keep it in aquariums. This is the most popular species. It's called cardinal shrimp from Sulawesi. It's one of the species which are relatively easy to keep, but in most cases they are really challenging, because lakes have specific chemistry. We need to use special mineral salts to be able to keep them, and the lakes also have throughout the year constant high temperature, 29 to 30 degrees. So we need to respect that in aquariums, and really stable conditions, clean aquariums. We keep only small part of the species. There is at least 30 species of the shrimps and more than 60 species of the Tilomelania snails, and we keep just a little part of it and a little portion of the species. It's really difficult. There are also some endemic fish, quite a lot of them, and we can separate them into 4 groups. These are the rice fish. It's nearly 20 species endemic to the Sulawesi island, and they have very interesting biology, because they carry the eggs. As you can see, female carries the eggs, which are fertilized. In most cases, female carries the eggs only for a couple of hours and then strips them on the plants or other substrate. But there are some species that carry the eggs throughout the whole development. It means 2 or 3 weeks carrying them until you see there are eyes of the fry, which is ready to hatch. So quite interesting species. Some of them critically endangered or only endangered. They are almost not kept in aquariums. That's even more true for sailfin silversides. You see attractive fish. Again, we talk about 20 species or so which are endemic to the lakes, with one exception that lives in rivers, but they are very diverse in the lakes. Again, with exception of 2 species, they are not kept in aquariums. They have never been kept up in aquariums. And why I say it? Because we don't have a plan B. We don't have an insurance population. There is no exit to conservation, and it's very difficult to catch these fish and transport them, acclimatize them in aquarium. They are very sensitive. So really the only safe space for these species are the lakes. Then we have half-beaks, another special group of fish typical for Sulawesi. We have almost 20 species, again, endemic on the island. Only few specialists here in Europe keep them, but again, just a small portion of the species. Otherwise, there's only few known about them. And then gobies, the last group of fish, attractive. They have been imported, but all these species which are endemic to the Sulawesi lakes, which is more than 10 species, they are yet to be bred in aquariums. Nobody managed to raise their larvae. They can spawn readily, but the larvae are very tiny, and nobody, even though some goby experts tried that, nobody has managed to find a suitable first food. So no plan B, no exit to conservation, and we really need to protect the lakes if we don't want to save these species. I have already mentioned the snails. That's my personal favorite group, so the reason why I actually work in Sulawesi, and no wonder, because they are just beautiful. All these nice colors, and they are live-bearing, so they give birth to large babies. Some of the species are easy to keep in aquariums, so some of them have this plan B, have the insurance populations, but they are sold in large numbers in Europe, but mostly people buy them for their community tanks, don't provide the right temperature and so on. So they are most consumed for aquarium hobby than being protected. But it's not only the Telomelania, there are also other groups of endemic snails. Some of them are really badly adaptable for aquariums. This is just a sample from one location in Lake Poso, what you can collect in one place in 10 minutes. And for a snail lover like me, that's just a paradise. But as I said, there's more snails. Also the orange objects you see around the bigger snails. This is a representative of Sulawesi Keepers, genus endemic to the island. And I can already say that the smaller the species is, the most threatened it is. It's really close to extinction, and I will explain later why. And the last group of animals you can't miss when you are snorkeling in the lakes are crabs. 6 species so far are classified as endangered, but the diversity of the crab species is much bigger also in the rivers, not only in the lakes. Crabs are imported in large numbers in Europe, especially this one. It's called panther crab in the hobby. And the same applies, like what I've said for gobies and other fish. They are yet to be bred in aquariums. Imported in large numbers, but nobody has managed to breed them. It's quite easy to keep them for weeks, maybe a few months. So people feel like, okay, I'm successful in keeping the species, but to keep them in the long term and have them breeding, that has not been achieved yet. So that's one of the groups we want to work with a high priority on. Now, I have started keeping some Sulawesi snails 15 years ago and tried to raise the gobies and so on. But when I looked at the IUCN Red List recently, sorry, not recently, but 3 years ago, I found out to my big surprise that some of the species that we keep and admire in aquariums are actually critically endangered, also considered to be extinct because they were not found in a couple of years during some surveys. So one of them is this Sulawesi cardinal shrimp. Unfortunately, conservation organizations are working mainly with fish. Nobody cares about invertebrates. There are very few projects working with them. So that's why I founded Sulawesi Keepers, also with the support of Ostrava Zoo, where I work, and bringing together everyone that knows something about Sulawesi freshwater and cares about them. So there's few of our partners. I have to say we have great support from aquarium hobby, also financial, but also the expertise. And just like I said that there are 4 groups of animals I presented, so it's fish, shrimps, snails, and crabs. There are also 4 main pillars that are building and supporting the Sulawesi Keepers initiative. And these are the aquarists. They are the real experts. Then research. Some of the scientific groups from Germany, they work for 20 years in Sulawesi Lake, so they have quite consistent knowledge, and that's actually them who started to talk loud about the threats and the alarming situation there. Then we have zoos and other conservation organizations because they have the experience and the opportunities that we need. And local communities, of course. That's the key factor in success. Reason number 1 why the invertebrate populations are declining are invasive fish in this case, especially flowerhorn. Flowerhorn is a man-made hybrid from several Central American species, and unfortunately it's released by fish keepers into open waters, and in many places of Southeast Asia it's become quite common in the waters. Now you can imagine that the impact of the ecosystem can be really drastic because it's a cichlid, so it protects its fry, so it means it breeds very well, it spreads rapidly, it will eat just anything it can find, it's highly adaptable. And on the other hand, the fishermen here in Sulawesi, they just don't like to catch this fish because they operate in these lakes, traditional fisheries that are targeting small pelagic fish, also snails and shrimps, and they are not interested in catching flower horns, not at all. Now we can easily imagine what is the impact for an individual shrimp when it meets a flower horn. It gets eaten, or it just hides under the rock. But what is the impact on the whole ecosystem? It's difficult to explain it, but first of all, you have to understand that most of the biodiversity I've just presented here is concentrated in one lake system. It's a Malili lake system, and it consists of 3 major lakes. Lake Matano, which is the uppermost, Lake Mahalona, Lake Tovuti, and they are connected by rivers. There are also 2 small satellite lakes, very small. And each of these lakes harbors unique fauna, so the species are quite often endemic to just one of these lakes. In some cases, they are endemic to Mahalona and Tovuti together, or the whole system, but mostly it's just species is endemic to one lake. Now, the flower horn appeared 12 years ago in Lake Matano. It's the uppermost. It was detected by German scientists, just a few individuals, and year by year, they were spreading, breeding, and they are already in the other lakes, I can say, unfortunately, but Lake Matano is now full of them, and the previously rich lake has turned into a pond for flower horn. So you have flower horns everywhere. And they are waiting for any movement. They just eat anything that is suspicious. These are sailfin silversides. I think the fish that are pelagic, they live in the open water, are not affected by flower horns because they are really quick and stay in the open water. But what is the problem are the gobies. Gobies are strongly bottom-oriented, and they are slow feeders. If you have ever seen goby, how it eats, usually things, and it's quite visible because flower horns are cichlids, they are clever. They see if there is some change in the pattern, the fish behaves in a strange way, like thinking about eating something or initiating spawning. Then the flower horns notice it, they just surround the poor fish and wait for a meal. So the gobies have problems in reproducing. The same is valid for the crabs, they are bottom-oriented. Adult crabs are protected well against flower horns, but we have witnessed several times that flower horns attack a crab, tear it apart and eat it. These were juvenile crabs when they are not hiding properly, and also adult crabs after molting, sorry. And to mate, actually, the crabs need to molt. In that time, they are really vulnerable, and they are behaving in a way that it's quite conspicuous that something is happening, so flower horns go there and interrupt them. There is a double pressure on the crabs because some of the endemic species are molluscivores, means that their primary food are snails, and this is the same is true for the flower horns. They are mainly eating snails, so the crabs, even though they are not really directly threatened in most cases, it's increasingly difficult for the crabs to find snails. That is the most drastic change you can actually see in Lake Matano. This is Lake Tovuti, which is most intact of the lakes, and you see snails on every substrate, on the rocks, on wood, on plants. Here again, the orange objects around the bigger snails is the Sulawesi drobia. You can find these snails everywhere, they are not hiding, while in Lake Matano, Sulawesi drobia, there are several species and they are all considered or were considered to be probably extinct already until we verified their presence in 2023. We found them in a very small protected zone in the shallow water where there are strong waves and flower horns don't enter the zone. Sulawesi drobia, they are hiding under the stones. But this used to be a really common species on every substrate everywhere. But no wonder that Sulawesi drobia is eaten because you see it's a really tiny snail. All the species from this genus are really small. So it's an easy prey for flower horns. But what is more visible, you see here there is a baby of Tylomelania born. That's a picture from an aquarium. In that white round object there is a baby Tylomelania just born. These snails are born with a size between 3 to 20 millimeters, can be really large. Depends on the size of the species and the mother, of course. But that is already a prey that can be eaten easily by flowerhorns. And in Lake Matano, they used to be full of snails everywhere. The small species, which are growing up to 3 centimeters, you cannot find them. Again, we found them last year, luckily in some very small protected zones, but they were abundant, yeah. And the level of the lake is changing, so you cannot just be calm and say, okay, they will live forever in this protected zone. No, it's a very small zone of the lake, and they cannot be hiding there forever. And what you see, this is Tylomelania patriarchalis. It's the biggest species of Tylomelania, can grow up to 12 centimeters. And it's evident from the picture that these are really old snails. They can live for many years. You see the corroded shells, so these are old and no babies. You cannot find any young Tylomelanias in the lake, nothing. But there you see one small snail. It's actually Thiarid. It's not native species in the lake. So it's another alien to this fragile ecosystem. It has a different breeding strategy and also spends most of the time in the mud or soft substrate, so that's why it can avoid flowerhorns. It's thriving, but Tylomelanias, they will be gone in a couple of years. They are not hiding. They are not like shrimps that still stay there, but under the stones hiding, but snail is, well, they have evolved in these million years into some animal that never needed to hide. So that's flowerhorns, big problem. It's not the only problem, of course. There are also algae quite visibly spreading in the lake. And on some places they are creating this thick carpet on the stones, which creates another problem for the shrimps which are hiding under the stones, because there is oxygen depleted zone below the algae. There is high content of dissolved oxygen in the water normally, and this is causing a problem, and the look of the lake, it's completely changing. Now, one reason for the algae, we are discussing whether it's the flowerhorns eating the invertebrates, which in turn cannot clean the stones, or it's first the pollution causing the algae to grow and then making the situation for invertebrates worse. But no matter what the answer is, pollution is taking place. There are only very few villages around the lakes and some towns, but they are in remote areas, so it's not like really populated area. But people living around the lakes, they don't care about plastic garbage, domestic waste. It's definitely not nice. This is Lake Matano. And here on the right edge of the photo, you can see a house of a shrimp collector from Lake Tavuti. So even a person who knows very well about the rich biodiversity and makes his living out of it does not see any problem in dropping the garbage from his own terrace in the lake. That's a serious cultural problem. There is a sign saying don't drop any garbage in the lake, put by local authorities, but people just ignore it. Yeah. And I have to say that Indonesians, they are really intelligent people, very polite people, so it's difficult to tell them, hey, what you are doing. There is no short-term solution like, okay, stop polluting the lakes. We really need to work with them carefully, and it will take some time. There is a huge nickel mine just above Lake Matano causing some problems with the pollution, but we have not detected any serious problem linked directly to the mining. People from Sorowako, which is the major town in the region, they are proud of the mine, really proud of the mine. They are not proud of the lake at all. They really don't know what species they have there and what they are about to lose if they do not act. And that brings us finally to our actions. We try to inform people as much as we can about Sulawesi endemics, the threats, and what we will lose soon. So we publish a lot of information in 5 languages, in English, German, Dutch, Czech, and Indonesian, of course. We try to publish a lot of information for the breeders in Europe. We try to make the breeders more effective, giving them the information about the natural parameters of the water and the natural conditions, and just creating a network of responsible breeders so that they can exchange information and be efficient, so that we can actually start conservation breeding. We have already launched a conservation breeding program for fish, and we will later work on snails, shrimps, and crabs one day when we manage to breed them. At Ostrava Zoo, we have started to keep some of the rarest, most threatened species, but I admit that we rely heavily on hobbyists, because they have the expertise and the capacity, of course, which not all zoos, not just ours, but all zoos can hardly provide the capacity that hobbyists have. And we work in Sulawesi, of course. That means taking water samples. That is important because, as I said, lakes have really particular chemistry, and we do monitoring of the species, monitoring of the ecosystem. I have showed you shrimps, snails, fish, crabs, but there is much more to be seen in the lakes. They are really unique. There are dozens of endemic diatoms, for example, because all lakes with special chemistry. So you have sponges, some of them not described yet, endemic to the lakes quite often. You have this bivalve, which is endemic, and it's really special because it's cemented with one side to the rock in freshwater, something really special. And you have this snail, which looks like marine, but it's freshwater. It's actually from the family of Planorbidae, so it's a common snail, but doesn't look like ram's horn. But it's endemic of one single bay of one lake, so it's really particular. And on its shell, you can see there's another snail, also endemic, also special because it lives exclusively on shells of other snails. And I could go on for hours showing you the interesting animals. But that's what we try to do with the local people, showing them these interesting animals. And we have a great partner at Lake Poso. It's a grassroots community, and they work in a social area. But we have developed some programs for the schools to show the children how special is the biodiversity in their lake. They also have some mini museum in their facility, and we have developed a program of bringing aquariums to schools directly to classrooms. I believe it's important because we hope that some children observing the aquatic creatures will just fall in love with them, just like I did, and maybe many of you in this room. Yeah. That works really easy, aquariums. Well, our ultimate goal is to have people observing and conserving the biodiversity directly in the lake, which is difficult. It's not a typical leisure time activity in Indonesia to go snorkeling in fresh water. So that will take some time until we convince them it's really worth trying it. Then we have a cooperation with University from Makassar, that's the capital city of Sulawesi. And we made 2 years ago some webinar and showing them our work and the wonders of Sulawesi underwater. And that yielded some interesting cooperations and also friendships. So last October we worked with the students of the university at the lakes. They were helping us. We were actually also helping them because we try to encourage them to develop their own small conservation projects and apply for some conservation grants independently. They do it and they have been already successful, so that's really great that they're getting this interest. We are also turning this room into conservation breeding facility. That's the current state. It will take a lot of time and effort to make it a conservation breeding facility, but I believe it's really important to do it in Sulawesi, even though it's still far away from the lakes, but that makes sense. And for this year, we have received a grant for the European Union of Aquarium Curators, and they will support our work with underwater drone. This is from some tests we have done in October, and we want to be monitoring more in the deeper layers of the lakes, because it's really difficult to get some monitoring. It's difficult to get people to go in the water and do snorkeling or diving. There's really bad infrastructure. And the underwater drone, we will teach local volunteers how to operate it and explain them what we need. And it will bring us many hours of monitoring. We want to see the interactions between flower horns and other species. We want to see how deep the crabs go, how deep the snails go, because these are really deep lakes and we don't know what's happening down there. We also hope that we will teach children how to operate the drone to collect some garbage, because there is a tool for collecting things and they can stream it online. So by using this drone and social media, we hope to make the conservation more attractive for them. And before I finish, I want to show you some plants, because it's not only about animals, there are also endemic plants in Sulawesi, quite a lot of them, and they are also very special, not comparable to the plants we know from aquariums. And they are also very difficult to keep elsewhere but in the lakes. So many people try to just keep this plant in aquarium, but they have failed. It's difficult. And we found out that it's also the plants are threatened. You see here, it's hydrilla. It's known worldwide for causing problems because it's invasive character. It can really spread rapidly, and we have seen that it's actually happening in just 1 year. We have noticed how it can spread fast, and it's here overgrowing the local plants. The local plants don't have enough space in the lakes because normally the shores are rocky, steep. There are only few locations good for the plants, and if hydrilla starts spreading there, it is a problem. So we want to buy a drone, the flying one, to be able to monitor the spread of hydrilla, because we have seen in just 1 year from the red circle to the yellow how it's spreading, and it's going to be quick. In 2-3 years, I think it's going to be overgrown. So to be able to implement some measures, and we start with the mapping of this plant. We are also discussing if we can install some physical barriers to prevent flower horns from accessing some small protected area, but that's difficult. You know, they have very small fry, and to maintain a fence in a lake in Indonesia, you would have to have a guard there all the time maintaining, I don't know, it's really difficult. But okay, flower horns are the problem number 1 and quite urgent. So this year we will also organize some championship for fishermen so that they can get paid for catching as many flower horns as they can. That will not solve the problem. 590 meters deep and a huge lake, so we will just get some time to implement other measures and just win some time for the species to survive, and we'll think about it. But the work will take many years, and we are investing in educating the local people. Definitely showing them what is in the lakes is the first thing we can do, and it's easiest with the children. They are easily attracted and really enjoy what we do. Now, you have 30 seconds to think about the idea how to get rid of the flower horns. This is Lake Tovuti, the one that is not affected, and there's a lot of shrimps, several species that live pelagic like this, and there are thousands of them. I bet you have not seen this in a freshwater lake, just swimming through the shrimps. And imagine a flower horn. It is already in the lake, just very few specimens, but in 3-4 years when they breed, this will not be compatible. Thank you very much. So, if you have questions, I'd like to answer, but you can also give me your proposal how to get rid of the flower horn. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Markéta, for this wonderful talk. Also for you, a little gift from AQUATIS side. But I would like to open a small round, a quick round with questions. Anyone has Quelques questions? Oui.
Thank you for the conference. I have a question about other cichlidae. Are they prohibited in Sulawesi, or people can have them in aquarium like flowerhorn, and we can imagine that there will be other big fish that invade not only Matano but the other lakes?
Yeah, this is actually the major problem in Indonesia, probably. It's not only this cichlid, but in these lakes you already have several invasive species. And Lake Poso, which I have mentioned, where we work with the local community, for example, in Lake Poso you have, I believe, 17 native fish species, out of which 12, 13 are endemic, and there's more than 20 non-native species already. So what you normally see is another cichlid from Malawi. It's the most abundant fish in that lake, so it's a huge problem. But normally you don't see the impact as much as the flowerhorn, because it's really destructive. There were no fish like flowerhorns eating the invertebrates. The invertebrates are what makes the lakes really vulnerable and special. But there are many other non-native fish, and flowerhorns are legal. All these fish are legal. We have a cooperation with European universities and Indonesian universities, and they are working on some policy update, publishing some report on how exotic fish are spreading, because you have Potamotrigon stingrays, already established population in Indonesia. You have other places, other fish, and it's really changing. It's also dangerous for the fishermen. They don't like to have the stingrays in their water, so they are trying to come up with some policies to regulate what can be released into waters, not kept. They will remain legal, but at least that's also one of the problems, because we are discussing how to get rid of the flowerhorn. The day we manage to say, okay, lakes are free of flowerhorns, if we ever manage to do this, the day after somebody will come with another fish and just drop it, because Indonesians do it. It's not only them, of course, also people here do it, or in Czech Republic, they definitely do it. But in Indonesia, the rate of the survival, of course, of the non-native fishes is very high. So it's a serious problem, and we have partners working on the policy update, but it will still not make change in the people behavior.
Merci beaucoup. Any autre question pour Markéta? If not, I would like to thank you again, Markéta, for... sorry, je t'ai pas vu.
Thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. Do we have an idea whether there will be some tipping points at some point with these kind of lakes where you have mostly endemic species? I mean, how much time do you think there is left until really we reach that point where we might not have enough shrimps or snails and all that to sustain the functions that lake seems to have? Because to me it seems that, yeah, there is so much pressures already and it is very complex.
Well, the functions, functions as we see it, because these lakes are evolutionary really interesting and like for biologists, of course. For local people, they used to operate the fisheries, they used to harvest the shrimps. We have seen in these thousands of shrimps from the open water, they used to eat them. Now they just don't do it because they know there's few of them or none of them. Also, they used to eat the snails, then there's few of them. So they are just kind of complaining, but they still can operate the fishery targeting the small fish. So for them it's like not visible. Sometimes they complain about the flowerhorns because there's too many of them. But for them, they use the lakes for recreation, not for snorkeling, so they don't really see the difference, yeah? It's still a nice lake, you can take a picture on the shore of the lake. They are not noticing, yeah? It's just about not losing the species, because you can't have have them move to another place. You can't restore the lakes, and I believe what is happening there, some of the Sulawesi drobia snails probably are already extinct, some of the shrimps maybe, and the snails are close to extinction, yeah, maybe functionally extinct already because they're not breeding for a couple of years or not producing offspring that will survive. So what we are really thinking about creating this small protected area and trying to maintain the species there until we solve the problem with the whole lake. But it's just a matter of time, because the flower horns, when you are there, they just surround you, and they are, it's a fish pond for producing flower horns. Local people are asking if we can actually suggest what they do. If they manage to catch them, what is use of this fish? Yeah, they don't want to catch it for food. So if we come up with some economic idea that how they can make use of it, they will maybe be more interested in catching them. But I believe, I'm not really saying this is all bad and we cannot save it. Yeah, but we still have a couple of years before we see the same scenario in the other lakes where flower horns, they are 12 years in Matano, that's really bad, but they are maybe 3 or 4 years in Tovuti, so we still have a time to get ready for it. Yeah, stop the breeding, but I don't know really how. We were discussing about introducing a pike, another predator, yeah, but yeah, I don't know, genetic methods, we are discussing really different approaches, and yeah, that's I was hoping that you will come up with some brilliant idea.
Okay, so merci beaucoup. On va fermer. Non, you're tight.
The last one. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm very sad to listen to this, but I think it is something that happens more or less everywhere in the world. And when I will talk later, I will talk about histories in Madagascar as well. So, especially for lakes and so on, because it is an underknown biodiversity, it is difficult to explain to local people which is the meaning for this biodiversity, because there is no way to get money or to get rid of these invasive species. And invasive species are a common history around the world. So I'm very sad, but I would like also to know if in these lakes there are new things as well, because I may believe that there are undescribed species, and it is a run against the time also to know what it is inside, instead of it saying only about the damages, but I think we are forced to know what there is inside. So what is your opinion, which is the kind of unknown biodiversity in the lakes?
Yeah, there is definitely undescribed species, and there's been a lot of work done on the lakes, especially on Lake Poza, because it's where the German teams work. But that you say, yeah, it's kind of a positive thing and something that we can actually explain to local people. Indonesians are interested in a scientific career. They are somehow attracted to it. So if you say to small children that they can become a scientist, and the scientists from other parts of the world are coming there to see what's in the lakes, they become really interested. And they want to work with us because they want to participate on this exploration and become a scientist maybe. So telling them that this is already very unique and we can still work on new species and make a nice career, that's kind of positive thing that I have to say they are really accepting us in a positive way. And this is their motivation, I believe. They want to be involved in description of new species and somehow admire it. There is quite a lot of unknown still, especially as I mentioned, diatoms or groups and sponges, nobody's working on them. So also crabs, I'm sure they are undescribed species. Probably fish, maybe, yeah. Because there's species described last year of ice fish big fission still was not described.
Okay. Merci beaucoup.